The first thing Arabella Whitmore heard when she arrived at Ravenscroft Hall was the sound of a child crying. It was almost midnight. Rain struck the carriage windows so violently that the glass seemed to tremble beneath every drop. Beyond it, the ancient estate appeared and disappeared through curtains of darkness. Ravenscroft Hall was enormous. Its black stone towers rose above the surrounding trees, their narrow windows glowing faintly against the storm. Ivy-covered portions of the walls and the iron gates groaned as the carriage passed through them. Arabella pulled her cloak tighter around herself. She had traveled nearly 6 hours to accept the position of governess to Lady Beatrice Ravenscroft. It was the highest salary she had ever been offered, and she desperately needed it. Since her mother's death, Arabella had learned how quickly the world could grow indifferent to a woman without money. Their cottage had been sold, her mother's possessions divided among creditors, and their small savings gone within months. Then the letter from Ravenscroft Hall arrived, offering enough to restore her independence, perhaps enough to begin again. But the letter had contained something else, a sentence her mother had spoken shortly before her death. When the time comes, go to Ravenscroft Hall. Arabella had never understood what she meant. Until tonight. The carriage stopped. A servant opened the door. "Miss Whitmore?" Arabella gathered her skirts. "Yes, His Grace is expecting you." She stepped into the rain, and the servant hurried her inside. Warmth surrounded her, but it did nothing to remove the strange chill she felt. The entrance hall was enormous, its walls lined with portraits, generations of Ravenscrofts, staring down from gilded frames, dukes, duchesses, soldiers, politicians. But above the main staircase was an empty space where a portrait had clearly been removed. "Who was there?" she asked. The servant froze. "You should not ask questions about that." Before she could respond, a man's voice came from behind her. "You've arrived late." The Duke of Ravenscroft stood at the entrance to the hall. Julian Ravenscroft, 35, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed entirely in black. His face was handsome but severe, his eyes cold with the wariness of a man who'd learned not to trust anyone. "Your Grace." He studied her. "You are Arabella Whitmore?" "Yes." "You understand the position?" "I am to educate Lady Beatrice. Reading, history, music, and French." "You will not discipline her physically, of course. You will not leave the estate without permission." She hesitated. "Without permission?" His eyes hardened. "There are matters concerning this household that do not concern you." "I understand." He turned toward the staircase, then stopped. "There are 3 rules. Never enter my study, never discuss my late wife, and never allow my daughter to tell you stories about what happened in this house." "Why?" "Because children sometimes remember things adults have spent years trying to forget." He walked away. Then a tiny voice, "Miss?" A little girl stood halfway up the staircase, no older than 8. "Are you my new governess?" "Yes." The child glanced toward the corridor where her father had vanished, then whispered, "Then you must leave before he finds out who you really are." Arabella's smile vanished. "What did you say?" "My father doesn't know." "Doesn't know what?" The girl stared at the silver pendant around Arabella's neck. "That you're the woman my mother sent for." Arabella's blood ran cold. "Your mother?" The child nodded. She told me you would come, but your mother is dead." The girl shook her head. "No." Her voice fell to barely a whisper. "My mother is alive." Arabella did not sleep that night. She sat beside the narrow window in her bedroom, watching rain crawl down the glass. The child's words refused to leave her mind. "My mother is alive." But everyone knew Duchess Vivian Ravenscroft had died 8 years earlier. Arabella remembered reading about it in the newspapers. The Duchess had supposedly fallen from a cliff during a journey to Scotland. Her body never recovered, yet the family had eventually declared her dead. Arabella had never questioned the story until now. She touched the silver pendant around her neck. Her mother had given it to her shortly before she died. For years, Arabella had worn it without understanding why it mattered. But there had been something strange about her mother's final days. She had grown frightened whenever Ravenscroft Hall was mentioned, and just before her death, she had taken Arabella's hand. "When the time comes," Margaret Whitmore had whispered, "you must go there." "Where, Mama?" "Ravenscroft." "Why?" Her mother struggled to breathe. "Because the truth is waiting for you." Arabella had thought the illness was affecting her mother's mind. Now she wasn't so certain. The following morning, Arabella entered the breakfast room to find Beatrice sitting alone, pushing her plate away. "I don't want eggs," a maid sighed. "You never want eggs." "I don't want anything." Arabella sat beside her. "That's rather dramatic." Beatrice looked at her. "You aren't frightened of—" "No. Everyone else is. Perhaps everyone else is too easily frightened." For the first time, Beatrice smiled, then leaned closer. "I think Mother was right about you." Arabella's smile disappeared. "What did your mother tell you?" Beatrice glanced toward the door and lowered her voice. "She said you would come when Father was ready to marry again." Arabella blinked. "Your father is marrying?" "Yes." "Who?" "I don't know." Beatrice frowned. "But Father doesn't love her." "How do you know?" "Because he loved my mother." Before Arabella could answer, the dining room doors opened and Julian entered. The conversation ended immediately. "Beatrice." The girl lowered her head. "Yes, Father." "Your lessons begin at 9. "Yes." His eyes moved to Arabella. "Miss Whitmore." "Your Grace." "You seem to have settled in." "I have." "Good." He turned to leave, but Beatrice suddenly spoke. "Father?" Julian stopped. "May I ask Miss Whitmore something?" "No." "But I said no." He walked out. Beatrice stared after him. "Now you understand." "Understand what?" "My father is afraid." "Of what?" Beatrice's voice fell very quiet. "My mother coming home." Arabella felt a chill. Later that afternoon, Julian found her in the library. "You seem to be getting along well with Beatrice. She is a sweet child. She is not easy. Perhaps she simply needs someone to listen." For a moment, something softened in his eyes, then vanished. "You should be careful." "Of your daughter?" "Of this house." Arabella looked at him. "Your Grace, may I ask something?" "No, you have already answered." He almost smiled. Almost. Then his gaze fell to the pendant around her neck, and he went completely still. "Where did you get that?" Arabella touched it. "My mother gave it to me." "What was your mother's name?" "Margaret Whitmore." The Duke stepped backward, and for the first time Arabella realized he knew her mother's name. Perhaps he knew much more. 3 weeks passed. Arabella slowly settled into life at Ravenscroft Hall. Beatrice became attached to her almost immediately. She loved history, hated arithmetic, and possessed an imagination determined to turn every ordinary event into an adventure. Julian, however, remained distant. He was always polite, never cruel, but there was a wall around him. Arabella sometimes wondered whether he had built it after losing his wife. Then she began noticing things. The Duke always appeared whenever Beatrice became upset. He remembered exactly how Arabella took her tea. He knew when she had skipped lunch, and sometimes when he thought she wasn't looking, she caught him watching her. Neither of them mentioned it. One evening, Arabella was returning to her room when she heard music, piano music, slow and melancholy. She followed the sound down the west corridor. It came from behind a locked door. The music suddenly stopped, and then she heard a woman's voice. "Julian." Arabella froze. The voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Julian." She stepped closer, her heart pounding. The door was locked. She remembered the Duke's first rule: never enter his study, but curiosity pulled her hand toward the handle. Before she touched it, a voice behind her made her jump. "Miss Whitmore." She turned. Julian stood at the end of the corridor, his face unusually pale. "What are you doing here?" "I heard music." "There is no music." "I heard a woman." "There is no one here." Arabella stared at him. "But I heard someone say your name." His expression hardened. "Return to your room." She should have obeyed without question. Instead, she asked, "Was it your wife?" Silence. Julian's jaw tightened. "Never ask me that again." He walked past her. Arabella watched him disappear. That night, she opened the silver pendant. For the first time, she noticed the back panel was loose. Her fingers trembled as she pushed it, and the pendant opened. Inside was a tiny folded piece of paper. Arabella unfolded it. 5 words were written in faded ink. "When you arrive, trust no one." She read it again, then noticed a small symbol beneath the words, a black rose. Arabella had seen that symbol before. It was carved into the wooden door of the Duke's study. The next afternoon, she found another message hidden inside one of her books. "If you want the truth about your mother, find the room beneath the library." Arabella looked around. Someone had entered her room while she was away. Someone knew about her mother, and someone knew exactly what she had come to Ravenscroft Hall to discover. That night she waited until the servants had retired, then entered the library. She searched behind paintings, inside drawers, beneath tables. Nothing. Then she noticed a black rose carved beneath an old wooden desk. She pressed it. A bookshelf moved, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Arabella stared down. Every sensible instinct told her to return to her room. But she thought of her mother. She thought of Vivian. And she thought of the Duke's strange reaction to her pendant. She lit a candle and descended. At the bottom was a small hidden room. Old letters covered the walls, along with photographs, newspaper clippings, documents. Then Arabella saw a portrait. She lifted it. Her breath caught. The woman in the painting was Vivian Ravenscroft, the missing Duchess. But that wasn't what frightened Arabella. Vivian was wearing a silver pendant, the exact pendant Arabella had around her own neck. Arabella stepped backward. No, a man's voice came from behind her. "You finally found it." She turned. Julian stood in the doorway. For several seconds neither of them spoke. Julian looked at the portrait, then at Arabella's necklace. His expression changed. "Where did you get that?" "My mother gave it to me." "When?" "Before she died." Julian slowly entered the room. "Your mother." Arabella's eyes narrowed. "You knew her." He said nothing. "You knew my mother." Still nothing. Her voice became firmer. "Who was she?" Julian closed his eyes, then answered. "Your mother was my wife's closest friend." Arabella stared at him. "Then why have I never heard you mention her?" "Because she disappeared." "Like your wife?" His eyes opened. "Yes." Arabella felt a chill. "What happened to them?" "My wife discovered that someone inside this household was stealing from the estate." "And my mother?" "She helped her investigate." "What happened?" "They were betrayed." "By whom?" Julian's expression darkened. "I don't know." Arabella stepped closer. "You're lying." "I am protecting you." "From what?" Before he could answer, a crash sounded upstairs, then a scream. "Beatrice." Julian ran. Arabella followed. Smoke filled the corridor. Flames were spreading through Beatrice's bedroom. "Beatrice!" The child screamed from inside. Julian tried to open the door, but the heat forced him back. Arabella grabbed a nearby blanket, wrapped it around herself, and rushed through the smoke. "Miss Whitmore!" She heard Beatrice crying. "Where are you?" "Here." Arabella found her trapped beside the bed. "Hold on to me." She pulled the child toward the door. Julian reached them and lifted Beatrice into his arms, carrying her outside. Servants rushed in with buckets. Minutes later, the fire was extinguished. Beatrice clung to Arabella, trembling. Then Arabella noticed something on the floor, a piece of paper. She picked it up. 4 words had been written across it. She should have left. Julian read the message. His expression turned murderous. This wasn't an accident. Arabella looked at him. "Someone tried to kill your daughter." He nodded. Then Beatrice whispered, "There, angry because I remember." Arabella crouched beside her. "Remember what?" Beatrice looked toward her father. Julian went pale. The night mother disappeared, the room fell silent. Julian knelt before his daughter. "Beatrice." She began crying. "She told me not to tell you." "Who told you?" "Mother." Julian stared at her. "What did she tell you?" Beatrice looked at Arabella. "She told me that one day a lady would come." Arabella felt her heart tighten. "Who?" "You?" Julian stood. "That's enough." But Beatrice shook her head. "She said Miss Whitmore would help us." Julian looked at Arabella. Neither understood what the child knew. That night, Julian found Arabella outside the library. "You should leave." She looked at him. "Because of the fire?" "Because of me." "Your Grace." "No." His voice was quiet. "Everyone who gets close to this family gets hurt." Arabella stepped closer. "Perhaps everyone who gets close to you has been afraid to stay." He stared at her. For a moment neither spoke. Then Julian whispered, "Don't make me care about you." Arabella's heart stopped. Before she could answer, he walked away. Arabella spent the next morning avoiding Julian. It was easier that way. At least, she told herself it was. She concentrated on Beatrice's lessons and tried not to think about the strange vulnerability she had seen in the Duke's eyes the night before. But Beatrice noticed everything. "Father upset you?" Arabella looked up from the book. "Your father doesn't upset me. He does, Beatrice. You like him." Arabella nearly dropped her pen. "I beg your pardon." Beatrice smiled. "You do. Young ladies should not make observations about such things." "Why?" "Because it isn't proper. Father says proper is boring." Arabella tried not to smile. "Your father says many things." Beatrice leaned closer. "Mother liked him too." Arabella's expression softened. "I imagine she did. She told me he was kind." Arabella looked toward the window. "I think he still is." The door opened. Julian stood there. Beatrice immediately fell silent. "How are your lessons progressing?" "Very well," Arabella answered. Julian nodded. "Beatrice, I need to speak with you." The girl left. Julian remained. "I owe you an apology." Arabella looked at him. "For what?" "For what I said last night. You were protecting me." "That doesn't excuse it." She smiled faintly. "No," he looked at her. "Then perhaps you will forgive." "I'll consider it." Something almost resembling amusement crossed his face. Then he noticed a letter lying on the desk. "What's that?" "I don't know." She had found it that morning beneath her pillow. No name, no seal. Julian picked it up. His expression changed after reading the first line. "What is it?" He handed it to her. Arabella read, "Miss Whitmore, if you have discovered the room beneath the library, you now know that the story of Ravenscroft Hall is not what you have been told." Her hands trembled. "Your mother did not die from illness." Arabella stopped breathing. Julian looked at her. "Keep reading," she continued. "She was murdered because she knew what happened to Duchess Vivian." Arabella covered her mouth. The next line was worse. "The man responsible still walks freely." Julian took the letter. "Who sent this?" "I don't know." "Does anyone know about the hidden room?" "Apparently." He read the final sentence. "If you want to know who killed Margaret Whitmore, ask the Duke why he lied about the night of the fire." Arabella looked at Julian. "You lied?" "I never told you everything." "That's not the same thing. It is when someone is trying to uncover a murder." She stepped closer. "What happened that night?" Julian looked away. "My father had been ill for months." "What does he have to do with it?" "Everything." He walked to the window. "The night Vivian disappeared, my father called me to his study." "Why?" "He told me someone had been stealing from the estate." Arabella's heart began pounding. "Who?" "He didn't know." "Then what happened?" "Before he could tell me, the west wing caught fire." "And Vivian?" "I searched for her." "And my mother?" "I found her outside the burning wing." "Alive?" Julian closed his eyes. "Yes." Arabella stared at him. "What happened?" "She gave me the pendant." Arabella touched it. "What did she say?" Julian's voice broke. "She said, if I don't survive, tell my daughter that I never betrayed her." Arabella couldn't speak. "Your mother knew she might die." "Yes." "Then why didn't you tell me?" "Because she made me promise." Arabella looked at him. "Promise what?" "To keep you away from Ravenscroft Hall." Silence. And yet you hired me. Julian turned. I didn't. Arabella froze. What? The position wasn't offered by me. Arabella stared at Julian. Then who hired me? I don't know. But the letter came from Ravenscroft Hall. No, your seal was on. It was forged. Arabella stepped backward. Someone had deliberately brought her to Ravenscroft Hall. Someone who knew about her mother. Someone who knew about the pendant. And possibly someone who wanted her dead. Julian reached for her hand. From this moment, you do not go anywhere alone. She looked at him. You expect me to obey? Yes, you're becoming rather demanding. I am serious. So am I. She pulled her hand away. I didn't come here to be imprisoned. I know. Then don't treat me like a prisoner. His expression softened. I'm trying to keep you alive. Before she could respond, a carriage arrived outside. Julian looked through the window. His face turned cold. Who is it? He didn't answer. Arabella followed his gaze. A distinguished gentleman stepped from the carriage, wearing an immaculate dark coat, his silver walking stick decorated with a black rose. Who is that? Lord Adrian Wycliffe. Arabella recognized the name, the man Beatrice had warned her about. Adrian entered the drawing-room with a smile. Julian, Adrian. Their handshake was brief. You've returned. I've returned many times, not to my house, Adrian laughed. Perhaps you should invite me more often. Julian's expression remained cold. What do you want? To see an old friend? You were never my friend? Adrian's smile faded. Then his eyes moved toward Arabella. And who is this? My daughter's governess. Adrian studied her. Arabella Whitmore. She froze. You know me. I knew your mother. Julian stepped between them. You should leave. Adrian smiled. Your mother was a remarkable woman. Arabella stared at him. What did you know about her? More than you imagine. Then tell me. Adrian's expression turned, strangely sympathetic. Your mother was murdered because she trusted the wrong people. Julian's voice hardened. Enough. Adrian looked at him. You still haven't told her. Told me what? Adrian smiled. Ask him. Julian moved closer. You have 5 minutes to leave. Adrian laughed. You haven't changed. He turned toward Arabella. You have something that belongs to me. Her hand instinctively touched the pendant. Adrian noticed, his eyes darkening. Ah, Julian stepped forward. Leave. Adrian walked toward the door. Before leaving, he stopped. Your mother stole something from my family, Arabella answered. She stole nothing. Adrian looked at her. You don't know what she did. Then he whispered, Ask yourself why she sent you here. He left. Arabella remained silent. Julian turned toward her. Do not listen to him. Why? Because Adrian lies. Then why did he know about my mother? Julian didn't answer. Arabella realized something. The Duke was afraid. Not of Adrian. Of what Adrian might reveal. That evening, Arabella found another note beneath her teacup. Midnight. Conservatory. Come alone. She knew she should tell Julian. Instead, she folded the note and placed it in her pocket. At midnight, she entered the conservatory. Moonlight shone through the glass roof, and the plants cast long shadows across the marble floor. You're brave. Arabella turned. Adrian stood behind her. I came for answers. So did your mother. What does that mean? Adrian walked closer. She knew what happened to Vivian. So did you. Yes. Then tell me. He smiled. You won't like the answer. I've heard enough warnings. Your mother believed Julian was innocent. Arabella frowned. Wasn't he? She was wrong. Her heart stopped. What did he do? Adrian's voice lowered. Ask him who opened the west wing door on the night of the fire. Arabella stared at him. You? No. Your father? No. Then who? Adrian smiled. Someone you trust. Before Arabella could speak, the lights went out. A gunshot exploded through the darkness. Arabella screamed. When the lights returned, Adrian was gone. The conservatory window was shattered, rain pouring across the floor. Arabella looked around. No body, no blood, nothing, except a photograph lying near the door. 3 women standing together, her mother, Vivian, and a third woman. Arabella stared. It was her Aunt Lydia, the woman who had raised her, the woman who had always claimed Margaret died from illness. Arabella turned the photograph over. 3 words were written on the back. She knows everything. Arabella hurried back toward the manor. Julian was waiting in the corridor. Where have you been? She hesitated. Walking. At midnight? I couldn't sleep. His eyes narrowed. You met someone. She said nothing. Arabella. It was the first time he had used her first name. She looked at him. His expression was no longer that of a duke. He looked frightened. Tell me. She handed him the photograph. He stared at it. Where did you get this? Adrian. You met him alone? Yes. Julian's anger rose. He could have killed you, but he didn't. That doesn't make him safe. He said my mother knew the truth. Julian looked at the photograph again, then at Arabella. Your Aunt Lydia. You know her? I've heard the name. That's not enough, he sighed. Your mother once told Vivian she was afraid of Lydia. Arabella went still. My mother was afraid of her own sister? Apparently, she felt betrayed. Then why didn't anyone tell me? Julian stepped closer. Because secrets are how this family survived. And look where that brought you. He looked at her. I know. For a moment they stood in silence. Then Julian took her hand. Arabella didn't pull away. I don't want you hurt. Why? His eyes met hers. Because you are beginning to matter to me. Her heart raced. Before she could respond, a scream came from upstairs. They ran. Beatrice stood beside her bedroom window, holding a photograph, her face white. Father, Julian took it. It showed Vivian holding Beatrice as a baby. On the back were 4 words, she was never dead. Beatrice pointed toward the window. She left it. Julian stared at his daughter. Who? The child whispered. Mother. Julian searched Ravenscroft Hall until dawn. Every corridor, every room, every servant was questioned. Nothing. No one had seen Vivian. Yet the photograph remained. And Beatrice was certain her mother had returned. The following morning, Julian found Arabella in the library. We need to talk. About Vivian? About everything. He closed the door. 8 years ago, Vivian discovered that someone was secretly selling Ravenscroft property. Arabella listened. She confronted the man responsible. Who? Edmund Ravenscroft. Your uncle? Yes. Why would he do that? Because he believed I would never become Duke. Julian explained that Edmund had wanted control of the estate. He had been manipulating accounts and selling property through hidden companies. Vivian discovered the fraud. Margaret helped her gather evidence. Then everything changed. The night Vivian disappeared, your mother came to the estate. Arabella's heart tightened. My mother was here? Yes. They argued with Edmund? Yes. What happened? The west wing caught fire. Arabella whispered. And Vivian? We believed she was inside, but there was no body. No. And my mother? Julian looked at her. She was found outside. Dead? Yes. Arabella closed her eyes. Did she suffer? I don't know. He approached her. Arabella. She looked at him. Did you think she betrayed Vivian? Never. Then why didn't you tell me? Because I promised your mother. What promise? To keep you away from this. Arabella laughed bitterly. And yet I'm standing here. I know. She looked at him. Why did you let me stay? He was silent. Because I couldn't make myself send you away. Her expression soft. Why? Julian stepped closer. Because every time I looked at you, I saw the possibility that perhaps this family had been given one more chance. Arabella's heart beat faster. Then he stopped himself. You should leave before that. Possibility becomes dangerous. She shook her head. I'm not leaving. Arabella, no. She stepped closer. Someone killed my mother. Someone destroyed your family. And someone tried to kill Beatrice. Her voice became steady. I'm going to find out who. Julian stared at her. Then, slowly, he nodded. Then we do it together. That night, Beatrice came to Arabella's room. Miss Whitmore? Yes? Mother told me about you. Arabella sat beside her. What did she say? She said you would be brave. Why? Because you would have to choose. Choose what? Beatrice looked toward the door. Whether you want to know the truth. Arabella smiled sadly. I do, the child nodded. Then go to the chapel. Arabella froze. Why? Because Mother waits there. The old chapel stood beyond the gardens. It had not been used in years. Its windows were coated with dust, and vines had climbed over the stone walls. Yet when Arabella approached, she noticed something immediately. Fresh footprints. Someone had been there recently. She pushed open the door. Inside, candles were burning. Arabella stopped. Hello? No answer. She stepped farther inside. Then a woman's voice came from the darkness. Arabella. She froze. The voice was gentle, familiar. A woman stepped forward. Arabella could barely breathe. It was Vivian, the Duchess of Ravenscroft, alive, older, thinner, but unmistakable. You came. Arabella's eyes filled with tears. You know me, Vivian smiled. I knew your mother. Where is she? Vivian's expression broke. Margaret is dead. Arabella closed her eyes. I hoped. I know. Vivian approached her. Your mother saved my life. How? She helped me escape the night of the fire. Then why did she die? Because she went back for the evidence. Arabella stared. What evidence? The names of everyone involved. Vivian removed a small box from beneath her cloak. Inside were documents, financial records, letters, bank transfers, forged signatures. Arabella recognized one name immediately. Edmund Ravenscroft. My mother's pendant. Vivian nodded. She hid the final piece inside it. Arabella touched the necklace. What does it prove? That Edmund ordered the thefts. And Adrian? His son helped him. Then why is Adrian still free? Vivian's eyes darkened. Because Edmund had powerful friends. Arabella looked at her. Where have you been all these years? Hidden. Why didn't you return to Julian? Vivian looked away. Because Adrian threatened Beatrice. Arabella's blood went cold. He knew where she lived? He always knew. Then why send me here? Because I needed someone I could trust. Why me? Vivian touched her cheek. Because your mother believed you would finish what she started. Arabella's eyes filled with tears. I don't know if I'm brave enough. Vivian smiled. You already are. Suddenly footsteps sounded outside. Vivian's expression changed. Someone is coming. Arabella turned. Who? Run? The chapel doors opened. Julian stood there. He froze. His eyes found Vivian. For 8 years he had imagined this moment, sometimes embracing her, sometimes accusing her, sometimes begging her to tell him why she had left. But now that she stood before him, he could say only one word. Vivian. She whispered his name. Julian. He crossed the room slowly. You are alive. Yes. Why? Because I had to be. You could have come home. I couldn't. Why? Vivian looked toward Arabella. Because if I had returned, they would have killed Beatrice. Julian's face hardened. Who? Edmund. He stared. My uncle? Vivian nodded. Your uncle. Julian stood before Vivian as though the years between them had vanished. But they hadn't. 8 years had changed everything. He had buried her in his mind. He had mourned her. He had blamed himself. And now she stood alive before him. You sent letters. Vivian nodded. Dozens. I never received them. Edmund intercepted. Them. Julian's hands clenched. Why didn't you send someone else? I did. Who? Margaret. Arabella stepped forward. My mother? Yes. Vivian looked at her. Margaret risked everything to keep me alive. Arabella swallowed. What happened to her? She found the ledger, the one containing the evidence. Vivian nodded. She was going to bring it to Julian. Then Edmund killed her. Not directly. What does that mean? Thomas Whitlock ordered the fire. Julian went still. Whitlock? Your father's solicitor. But he disappeared. He was never gone. Vivian handed Julian the documents. Thomas worked with Edmund. Julian read the names. His expression changed. My father knew. Yes. He knew about the fraud? He discovered it. Then why didn't he expose them? Because they threatened you. Julian looked at Arabella. They threatened me? They told him that if he spoke, you would be accused of financial crimes and imprisoned. Julian closed his eyes. My father protected me. Yes, for years, Julian had believed his father had been weak, perhaps even corrupt. Now he understood. His father had sacrificed his reputation to protect his son. Arabella touched his arm. I'm sorry. Julian looked at her. Don't be. He looked toward Vivian. Why didn't you tell me? Because I believed I was protecting you. You made the decision for me. I know. His voice softened. I spent 8 years grieving you. Vivian's eyes filled with tears. I spent 8 years believing you hated me. I never hated you. She looked at him. Then why did you never marry? Julian didn't answer. Arabella quietly stepped away. She suddenly felt she was witnessing something deeply private. But Julian's voice stopped her. I couldn't. Vivian looked at him. Why? Because I was still waiting. Vivian closed her eyes. Arabella felt something tighten inside her chest. Julian had waited 8 years for a woman he believed was dead, and yet somehow he had begun to care for Arabella. The thought frightened her. That evening they returned to Ravenscroft Hall. Julian found Arabella alone in the library. You should be resting. So should you, he smiled faintly. I don't know how. Neither do I. Silence. Then he said, I owe you an apology. For what? For asking you to enter a house filled with secrets. You didn't ask me. No. He stepped closer. That's the problem. Arabella looked at him. You didn't choose me. No. Then what? His eyes held hers. I think fate did. Her heart skipped. Before either could say more, a gunshot shattered the window. Vivian screamed. Julian pulled Arabella down. Another shot struck the wall. Someone was outside. Julian drew his pistol. Stay here. He ran toward the door. Arabella looked at Vivian. The Duchess was clutching her side. Blood covered her hand. Vivian survived the shooting, but the attack changed everything. There was no longer any doubt. Someone knew she was alive, and they were willing to kill anyone who stood between them and the truth. Julian wanted to move Vivian somewhere safe. Vivian refused. The evidence must be found first. What evidence? The ledger. Arabella knew immediately what she meant. My mother's ledger? Vivian nodded. It was hidden at the old Whitmore house. Arabella hadn't returned there since her mother's death. The journey took several hours. When they arrived, the house looked smaller than she remembered. The windows were broken. The gardens vanished beneath weeds. Inside, dust covered everything. Arabella stood in the hallway. This was my home. Julian looked around. I remember. She turned. You came here? Once. When? Before your mother died. Arabella's eyes softened. My mother knew you? She trusted me. They searched the study. Nothing. The bedroom. Nothing. Then Arabella stopped. The clock? Julian looked at her. My mother never allowed anyone to touch it. He examined the grandfather clock. A small panel opened, and behind it was a black leather ledger. Arabella gasped. We found it. Julian opened the book. Names, payments, dates, forged signatures, property transfers, everything. Then he turned another page. His expression changed. What is it? Payments to Thomas Whitlock. Arabella leaned closer. And Edmund. Julian nodded. They worked together. He turned another page, and Arabella suddenly stopped him. There was an entry dated the night of the fire, West Wing, 11:40 p.m. Then beneath it, Margaret Whitmore, eliminate witness. Arabella covered her mouth. Julian closed the ledger. We have enough. A door slammed downstairs. Julian raised his pistol. Stay behind me. Footsteps echoed through the house. Then Adrian's voice came from below. You always were stubborn, Julian. Julian's expression hardened. Adrian entered the room with armed men. "Give me the ledger." "No." Adrian smiled. "Then we will make this difficult." He raised his pistol. A second voice came from the staircase. "Don't shoot." Everyone turned. A gray-haired man stood there, calm, elegant, unhurried. Arabella recognized him immediately. Thomas Whitlock, the man who was supposed to have disappeared 6 years earlier. Julian stared. "You," Whitlock smiled. "You finally found the truth. You're alive, obviously. You killed my father. No, you betrayed him. I protected him. By destroying his reputation? By keeping him alive." Julian stepped forward. Whitlock looked toward Arabella. "Your mother was less cooperative." Arabella's face hardened. "You killed her." Whitlock smiled. "She made a choice." "What choice?" "She chose Vivian over herself." Arabella trembled. Whitlock looked at the ledger. "Give it to me." Julian tightened his grip. "No." Whitlock nodded toward the door. "Then perhaps we should discuss your daughter." Julian froze. "What have you done to Beatrice?" Adrian smiled. "She's with us." Arabella's blood ran cold. Whitlock extended his hand. "The ledger." Julian looked at Arabella. She whispered, "Don't." Whitlock smiled. "Choose carefully, Your Grace." Julian's face was expressionless, but Arabella could see the fear in his eyes. Not fear for himself, fear for Beatrice. Whitlock extended his hand. "The ledger." Julian didn't move. "How do I know she's alive?" Whitlock smiled. "Because I expected you to ask." He nodded. One of his men brought Beatrice into the room, her hands tied, her face frightened. "Father." Julian's expression broke. "Beatrice." "Don't hurt her," Whitlock laughed softly. "Then give me the book." Arabella stepped forward. "Give it to me." Julian looked at her. "What?" "Give me the ledger." "No. Trust me." He stared at her. She whispered, "I have a plan." Julian slowly handed her the book. Arabella walked toward Whitlock and held it out. "Here." Whitlock took it, opened the cover, and his expression changed. The pages were blank. "Where is it?" Arabella smiled. "You tell me." Whitlock raised his pistol. "You think this is a game?" "No." She pulled another ledger from beneath her cloak. "The real one is here." Whitlock's eyes widened. "Give it to me." "No." He raised the pistol. Then a gunshot. Adrian fell. Everyone turned. Vivian stood in the doorway, holding a pistol. "You always were a coward, Thomas." Chaos erupted. Julian tackled one of the armed men. Arabella ran toward Beatrice and untied the child. "Are you hurt?" Beatrice shook her head. "Mother." Vivian rushed forward, and Beatrice threw herself into her arms. Julian fought Whitlock near the fireplace. The older man was stronger than he looked and struck Julian across the face. Julian stumbled. Whitlock raised his pistol. Arabella screamed. But before he could fire, the front doors burst open. Police officers rushed inside. Whitlock froze. Julian stared. Lady Margaret Ravenscroft stood behind the officers, Julian's aunt. "Margaret?" She smiled. "I believe this is what you were looking for." She held up a sealed packet. "Your father's original evidence." Whitlock's face went white. "You?" Margaret looked at him. "I kept copies for 30 years. The police seized Whitlock. Adrian was arrested. The remaining men surrendered, and after 8 years the conspiracy was finally over. Outside, dawn began breaking over the countryside. Arabella stood on the steps. Julian approached. "You knew?" She looked at him. "About the police?" He nodded. "Your aunt helped." "I didn't know. Neither did I," he smiled. "That makes 2 of us." Arabella looked toward the horizon. "It's over." Julian shook his head. "No." She turned. "It's beginning." The trial lasted for months. The evidence was overwhelming. Thomas Whitlock had manipulated the Ravenscroft finances for years. Edmund had helped him. Adrian had protected them. And Margaret Whitmore had died because she refused to reveal where the final evidence was hidden. But there was another truth that affected Julian more deeply than all the rest. His father had never been the corrupt man Julian believed him to be. He had known about the fraud. He had discovered the thefts, and he had tried to expose them. But Whitlock and Edmund had threatened his son. If he spoke, Julian would be accused of the crimes. His father had chosen silence. He had sacrificed his reputation to protect him. For years, Julian had hated his father's weakness. Now he understood that it had been love. After the trial, Julian went to his father's grave. Arabella stood beside him. For several minutes he said nothing. Then he placed a hand on the gravestone. "I'm sorry." Arabella looked at him. "You don't have to apologize. I spent years believing he had failed me. He didn't. No." Julian's voice cracked. "He was protecting me." Arabella reached for his hand. "He loved you." Julian looked at her. "How do you know?" "Because your father once told my mother that he feared losing you more than he feared losing everything else." Julian closed his eyes. A tear escaped. Arabella squeezed his hand. "You survived." He looked at her. "Because of you." She shook her head. "Because you refused to give up." He smiled. "Perhaps we both saved each other." For the first time, Arabella realized how deeply she had fallen in love with him. Not with the Duke, not with the estate, not with the mysterious man who had frightened her when she arrived. With Julian, the man beneath the title, the man who had lost almost everyone he loved and still found the courage to love again. That evening they walked through the gardens. Snow had begun falling. Julian looked at her. "Do you remember our first conversation? You told me never to enter your study. I was trying to protect my secrets. You failed completely." She laughed. He smiled. Then his expression turned serious. "Arabella." "Yes?" "I don't want you to leave." She looked at him. "Why?" "Because when this is over, I don't know what Ravenscroft Hall is supposed to be without you." She smiled. "It is your home." "No." He stepped closer. "You are." Arabella's eyes filled with tears. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why?" "Because I might believe you." "I want you to." He took her hand. "Then believe me." She looked into his eyes, and for the first time, neither of them tried to hide what they felt. Spring arrived slowly at Ravenscroft Hall. The snow disappeared. Flowers returned to the gardens, and for the first time in years, laughter could be heard throughout the house. Vivian remained with Beatrice. The child refused to let her mother out of sight. Julian returned to his duties. The estate recovered, and Arabella stayed. At first she told herself it was because Beatrice needed her, but that explanation had become impossible to believe. One evening Arabella stood beneath the old oak tree. Julian approached. "You are leaving." She turned. "I haven't decided. You said your work here was finished." "It is, then. Why are you still here?" She smiled. "Perhaps someone keeps giving me reasons to stay." He stepped closer. "I have one. What is it?" "You." Her smile disappeared. "Julian." "I know." He took a breath. "I know this is complicated. Because of Vivian? Not anymore." He looked toward the house. "Vivian has a life of her own now." Then he looked back at Arabella. "And so do I." Arabella lowered her eyes. "I don't want to replace anyone. You couldn't. I don't want to be the woman who came after your wife. You aren't? Then who am I?" Julian stepped closer. "You're Arabella." She looked at him. "Just Arabella. Just Arabella," he smiled. "The woman who walked into my house during a storm." She laughed softly. "The woman who broke every one of your rules. That, too." He reached into his coat. Arabella's heart began pounding. He opened a small silver box. Inside was a ring. She stared at it. "Julian, I had planned a speech. What happened? I forgot every word when I saw you." She laughed through her tears. He took her hand. "I spent years believing I had already lost the person I was meant to love." He looked into her eyes. "Then you arrived." Arabella couldn't speak. "I don't know whether fate brought you here." He slipped the ring onto her finger. "But I know I don't want a future that doesn't contain you." Arabella looked at the ring, then at him. "What if I say no?" He smiled. "Then I will wait." "How long?" "As long as necessary." She shook her head. "You've waited long enough." His eyes widened. "Is that a yes?" Arabella smiled. "Yes." He pulled her into his arms. For a moment the world seemed completely silent. Then Beatrice's voice came from somewhere behind the trees. "I knew it." They broke apart. Beatrice ran toward them. "You said yes." Arabella laughed. "How long have you been watching?" "Long enough." Julian shook his head. "You are impossible." Beatrice grinned. "You're getting married." "Apparently." "Can I choose the flowers?" Arabella laughed. "Of course." "And the cake?" "Perhaps." "And my dress?" Julian looked at Arabella. "I suspect we've created a monster." Beatrice smiled. "I learned from you." Julian looked at Arabella. "And I wouldn't change a thing." The wedding took place in spring. The same chapel where Vivian had once hidden became the place where Julian and Arabella finally began their life together. There were no secrets, no threats, no hidden identities, no marriage arranged for money, no fear. Arabella stood at the end of the aisle. Her ivory gown flowed behind her. Beatrice stood beside her, proudly holding the bouquet. Vivian sat in the front row. Julian waited at the altar. When the doors opened, everyone turned. Julian's eyes found Arabella, and for several seconds he simply stared. She smiled. He smiled back. When she reached him, he whispered, "You came." Arabella laughed softly. "I told you I wasn't going anywhere." The priest began the ceremony. "Do you, Julian Ravenscroft, take Arabella Whitmore?" "I do." The priest smiled, then turned to her. "And do you take Julian Ravenscroft?" "I do," Beatrice whispered loudly. That was quick. The church erupted in laughter. Even Julian laughed. The priest continued. The rings were exchanged. Then Julian took both of Arabella's hands. "I spent 8 years believing I had lost everything." Arabella looked at him. "And now?" "Now I understand that sometimes life takes something away only to lead us towards something we never knew we needed." She smiled. "You needed a governess?" He laughed. "No." He leaned closer. "I needed you." The priest pronounced them husband and wife. They kissed. Outside, the church bells began ringing. A sound traveled across the estate. Villagers gathered near the gates. Flowers were thrown into the air. Beatrice ran through the garden laughing. For the first time, Ravenscroft Hall felt alive. That evening, Arabella stood beside Julian on the terrace. Below them, Beatrice chased butterflies through the garden. Vivian watched from one of the windows. Julian took Arabella's hand. "Do you remember the night you arrived?" "How could I forget? You were frightened." "I was." "And you still stayed?" Arabella smiled. "Because someone had to teach your daughter. That is the official explanation." "And the unofficial one?" He looked at her. "You were always meant to find this house." She rested her head against his shoulder. "Perhaps." He kissed her forehead. "Are you happy?" Arabella looked across the gardens, at the house, at Beatrice, at Vivian, then at the man beside her. "Yes." She touched the silver pendant around her neck, the one her mother had left behind. Julian noticed. "You still wear it?" "Always." He kissed her hand. "Then Margaret's story didn't end with her death." Arabella smiled. "No." She looked toward the chapel. "It continued with us. That's the final chapter. The whole story is now reflowed. Let me know if you'd like all 14 chapters compiled into a single document or file." Years later, the people of the surrounding villages still spoke about the strange history of Ravenscroft Hall. They spoke about the Duchess who returned from the dead, the Duke who uncovered a conspiracy hidden for nearly a decade, the governess who arrived with nothing but a small trunk and a silver pendant, and the little girl who knew the truth before anyone else. But inside the manor, the story became much simpler. Beatrice grew into a confident young woman. Vivian remained close to her, and Julian and Arabella built the family neither of them had expected to have. The portraits on the staircase were restored. The empty space above the main hall was finally filled. Vivian's portrait hung beside Julian's, and beside them was a portrait of Arabella and Beatrice, beneath the old oak tree. One afternoon, Beatrice found Arabella in the library. "Mother?" Arabella looked up from her book. "Yes?" "Father says you used to be afraid of this house." "I was." "Why?" "Because it was full of secrets." Beatrice smiled. "And now?" Arabella looked around. Sunlight streamed through the windows. Flowers decorated the table. Children's books sat beside old history books. The room felt warm, safe, alive. She smiled. "Now it is full of memories." Beatrice sat beside her. "Do you ever think about leaving?" Arabella laughed. "Never." "Good." "Why?" "Because I don't know what Father would do." Arabella raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Beatrice grinned. "He still follows you around." Arabella laughed. Does he? All the time. A familiar voice came from the doorway. I heard that. They turned. Julian stood there. Beatrice smiled. I was telling Mother the truth. Julian shook his head. You are becoming far too clever. I learned from her. Arabella smiled. Julian walked toward them, kissed Arabella's forehead, then looked at Beatrice. Your tutor is waiting. Beatrice groaned. Do I have to go? Yes. She stood, then stopped. Father? Yes? Did you ever regret hiring Miss Whitmore? Julian looked at Arabella. His smile said everything. Never. Beatrice ran from the room. Silence followed. Arabella looked at Julian. You know, when I first arrived, you gave me 3 rules. Remember, never enter your study. Yes. Never discuss. Vivian. Yes, and never listen to Beatrice's stories about this house. Julian smiled. I was trying to protect you. And did it work? He shook his head. No. Arabella stepped closer. You were never very good at protecting me. I know. Why? Because you were always braver than I was. She smiled. Julian took her hand. Outside, the bells of the village church began to ring, the same bells that had once announced the disappearance of a duchess, the same bells that had later announced a wedding. Now they simply marked another ordinary afternoon, and perhaps that was the greatest victory of all. Ravenscroft Hall no longer needed secrets. It no longer needed locked doors. It no longer needed ghosts, because after years of grief, betrayal, and fear, the old house had finally become what it had always been meant to be, a home. And the governess who had arrived one stormy night as a stranger had become the woman who gave the Duke of Ravenscroft his life back. The end. If you enjoyed this story, and you would like to hear more tales of forbidden love, secrets, betrayal, and second chances, make sure to subscribe to English Love Stories. And if this story touched you in any way, leave a comment below and tell us. Would you have trusted Julian if you were Arabella? Your comments help us bring more stories like this to life. Thank you for listening. Sometimes, and remember, the greatest love stories are the ones that survive the darkest secrets. Until the next chapter.